Hey y'all, Katie here, founder of MOMnation and owner and operator of Team EvoAZ at eXp Realty, your go-to gal for anything real estate in the state of Arizona. I am the sponsor of today's show. I will link my page and information in the show notes so you can quickly and easily get in touch with me should you need anything real estate, any advice, or maybe you're looking to get into the business. I sure hope you enjoy today's show. Thanks for listening.
Hi guys, we're here.
Hey.
Episode 13. Can you even believe it, Katie? Oh my gosh.
At least it's not Friday.
Right?
Get the joke? Haha.
Friday the 13th, right? Yes. Well, hey, last time we had Friday the 13th, the entire nation shut down, the entire world shut down. So I think it's
right.
It's fair. I think that's a fair fear now. So
I didn't even think about that.
Right? Mm-hmm. It was like a full moon, Friday the 13th, and something else that was like weird. But it was like, okay, what is going on in the universe right now? So anyway.
I didn't make that connection yet.
Yeah. Right? Well, I made it because of a meme, let's be honest. So don't be
where Beth learns her stuff from.
That's where I learned the most important things in life. So what did you do this last week, Katie?
Look what I did. Can you see?
Cut your bangs?
Your bangs.
I didn't do it myself, but Candace did, and I went to go see her on Mother's Day. Like,
oh, nice.
We did the careful thing, I promise, but it felt so good to sit in the chair and like cover the grays and get the cut and all the stuff. So I am a happy camper. That was way too long to go.
I am like, let me think, 4 days away from my next hair appointment. Granted, I did a hair appointment before they shut down salons.
Yeah, you got lucky.
So like the day before they shut them down. So anyway, I feel you. I didn't even have like any irregular amount, but just emotionally, I need to go be with my hair girl and drink my White Claw, and that's what I do.
I love it. So that was about my Mother's Day. And then my mom came over and we ordered from Zeke's. Have you ever ordered from Zeke's? I live in Ahwatukee, by the way. I don't know if there's Zeke's anywhere else.
I've heard of it.
Is it like Greek? What is it?
Yeah, it's a pizza place. And they have the most delish wings ever. So we were cheating on our diets on Sunday because there's no calories on Mother's Day.
Oh, no.
And, right?
Yeah,
and they have great gluten-free, because we're gluten-free family over here. So they have great gluten-free crust.
You know what? You just gave me an idea of somebody that we need to have on. Yes. So my friend Jessica Nelson, she's like a huge proponent of like getting rid of diet culture. And so not thinking in terms of calories, not thinking in terms of restriction. The whole concept is that the reason that we're addicted to foods is because we restrict them. And if we stop like restricting and beating ourselves up for wanting the foods, all of a sudden it becomes easier to eat healthy. And so like, I've just been following her on Instagram. And so I've like started to just adopt this mindset. And like, I'm so shocked at how much I feel better about myself and my life. And I want to eat healthier foods just because I'm like, okay, I want a Baja Blast Mountain Dew from Taco Bell. I'm going to go get it and I'm not going to feel bad about it. And then I don't like need to like go to Salad and Go to, make penance for the fact that I ate Taco Bell. Right. And so anyway, it's been like life-changing just following her content and like hearing that this whole idea of don't count calories, don't beat yourself up for eating junk food. Like, let go of that and just watch.
I like it.
I like it a lot. And it makes a lot of sense. I was actually talking with a nutritionist in MOMnation. She's actually in MOMnation. I was talking with her last year, and we were talking about, kids and what kids eat, and how as parents we like freak out because we want to make sure that our kids are eating healthy and all of this stuff. When in all actuality, she said the stress that you put everybody through to do that is so much more debilitating than if they ate the frickin' goldfish. Like, just let them eat the frickin' goldfish, you know? And it's not going to destroy them. Their bodies aren't going to fall apart. And if it's going to reduce some stress, that's really better. And stress is just, it's a killer, man.
Yes, literally a killer. So, oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Good segue into the next topic.
I'm really excited for today's episode because I feel like, especially while everybody's been stuck at home with their partner, we need it.
And I never met a Katie I didn't like. So,
Katie. That's a very interesting point.
Yes. So I'm glad to have Katie on today, and we're going to be welcome. So we're going to be talking about an interesting topic that I think that is on the minds of just about everybody, whether you're married and probably even if you aren't, or if you're planning to, or if you just left one. So Katie, tell us a little bit about you and tell us why you're here.
Yeah. Hi, guys. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes.
I was telling Katie that. I was like, I've been part of MOMnation for so long. Mom, myself, my husband and I have been married for, oh gosh, I should know this, 11 years this week.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. And then I have this adorable little babes, my son. You can see him.
Aww. How old is he?
He decided to do his hair himself on that. He did like a impromptu. Mom, I decided I wanted spiky on that lovely picture day.
You're like,
I love it.
He's gonna be 6. He's gonna be 6 here in June. But yeah, his name is my son Camden. I'm born and raised from Arizona. Whoop, whoop. Heyo.
and get into those very often, as you might imagine.
I know. What about, are you guys like, where are you guys from?
New England.
He was born in Utah, but I grew up in New England. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So have you guys known each other that whole time?
No, you
met her through MOMnation.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That's awesome.
We have an interesting past, Beth and I.
We do. We'll
talk about that
on that one time. Yeah.
Is that a new episode?
That is an episode in itself.
Oh, it's definitely an episode, and a lot can be learned from that. We just came up with 2 new topics. We're doing good today.
Yes, we are. That will be a really good episode.
we have one on the way. So yes, I have a bun in the oven. We're due August. So I was like, baby bump shot.
Oh, I'm so jelly. So cute.
This is on Amazon, by the way, y'all. This is awesome. And it's like so $20 and super comfortable for summer. So I felt the need for all the moms out there who are expecting. I have like one in every color right now. So
so cute.
Good tip.
But yes, I am a marriage empowerment coach. And my specialty is working with women who are, I'll work with any woman who is really having a drive and goal and deep desire to make their marriage better. I help women transform their marriages. And the reason why, and I was talking a little bit about Katie pre-episode of this, is it all stemmed with and how it came to be with my own marriage nearly falling apart and coming back from that and transforming it into something that I did not even think would be possible. So I absolutely love working one-on-one with women to help them empower themselves in this process. And by rebuilding themselves and their identity and finding that peace and joy independently from their husband, I also give them very specific tactical tools for how they can start to actually transform those destructive patterns in communication and relationship with their husband.
So as you were saying that, you're saying like these are women who they want to make their marriage something amazing.
Yes.
So I'm wondering,
that's an important part.
that is key. One of the problems that I think I've seen people run into is they're just not sure if they want to make it work. So what do you say to people who they're at that point where they're just like, well, maybe I could work on my marriage and make it work.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if I want to make it work.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Been there 100%. So my husband and I, just to give you a little background, we were high school sweethearts. I have an ebook coming out. Actually, it should be done. It's only 12 pages, so if you hate reading, it's like a short story.
That's my kind of book.
Right there. Either that or Audible, or I'm not, or yeah. So
I'm out. Yep.
Yeah. But it's called, the title is We Fought on Our Honeymoon. And the specific reason I titled that was because, we had a very intense relationship. I mean, we're both we're Pisces. I'm very high, very low, right? Like, Katie and I were talking about that.
Together.
Pisces together. We're emotional. A day apart. And we have to share birthdays. So we have a lot against it. So long story short here, or I'm going to say that a lot because I can get wordy. So ladies, just let me know if I get a little too long.
We'll come up with a hand signal.
Just like, if you have like a music, like you can start playing me off the, okay.
Just fade her voice out.
So we got to like our 5th year in our marriage. And I felt like we were kind of to a stable point. So naturally we decided that would be a good time to have a kid. And we did. But it turns out that there was so much, I mean, we had so much between us that we needed to work out before that happened. But, having the kid, transitioning into being a stay-at-home mom, he's a busy coach. He coaches volleyball. And all those things combined, we really got to our breaking point. And so I know what you mean by when, like, I really was to that point, like, okay, we, on our honeymoon, like, we fought on our freaking honeymoon. Like, what am I fighting to get back to, right? Like, we had been to therapy a couple times. And I've threatened to leave on and off throughout, the marriage. And it was just like, okay, so sure, we had some good times on our best, right? Had some good sex, right? Like, but what am I really, like, even if we can repair this, we can put a Band-Aid on it. What are we even fighting to get back to? Right. So my real thing was, but what if we could transform it? So that's actually like a really big piece of as to, like, when I work with women, it's not that I didn't want it to work, right? It's not like, ultimately, like, at the heart of myself, I wanted to say, like, I'm good with my marriage ending and split custody and everything else that was going into it. But when I really stepped back and looked at it, it was like, that was like the only motivating factor for me to even stay right now, was like, I don't want to have to share custody. I don't want to have to split up my house, like, all of those thoughts, right? All of those feelings. And it's like, but that's not why I want to stay, right? Like, that's not why anybody wants to stay in a marriage. And so that was really something that I faced. And it was just like, look, I feel like I had tried everything. I tried therapy. We've tried, like, I've tried changing my communication tactics, and I mean, nothing is working. And we were just at our end, which is why we ended up doing a trial separation at that point in time. And it really just came down to, was, what do I still believe? What do I still believe in? What do I still have control over, right? And a big enlightening part for me, and what I hear a lot of women saying when they find themselves in this circumstance, is a lot of my effort to fix our marriage was in an effort to get me my needs met, to see him change so my needs would be met. So if you're following me, it's very unintentional. Of course, we all want to, and we have the best of intentions, right? Because I thought I was doing the best thing for us. I have a human and family development background, right? Like, we need to communicate constructively. We need to talk well. Like, this fighting needs to stop. All of those things, right? But it was really, if I got advice from a counselor, if I got advice from a friend, I would try it, and then if he didn't give me that response right back, if he didn't immediately change and hop on the it's go time for our marriage to be awesome train with me, it was like, well, what am I even doing this for, right? Like, and it would immediately like be defeated. But through like even just looking at my own journey as a wife, as a mom, I discovered that I was really looking to him. A lot of my own disappointment and a lot of my own discouragement came from me looking to him to fulfill my needs, to make me happy, right? And I was not happy. So why couldn't he just do these few things that I needed to make me happy, and then we could all be great again, right? So that perspective is really, really toxic for a marriage, right? Because the truth of the matter is we're all imperfect, right? Like, he's imperfect, I'm imperfect. We bring these ideas and beliefs about ourselves, about how marriage should be, about how love should be received, about how love should be given from, formulated from when we were a child and on up, right? And then we just reinforce them into our relationships. Even if they're completely dysfunctional, they're still our norm. And so a lot of times it's just a total blind spot. Like a lot of women I work with and I talk to are just simply viewing their husband's perspective, telling themselves their own story, right? When in all reality, it's not true, right? He loves you, you love him. You guys are two imperfect people trying to do life together. Houses, loss of loved ones. I mean, raising freaking kids. How hard is that, right? Like,
it's so hard. And I love what you said about, so you've been kind of trained, each and every person kind of trained into this way of thinking, into these habits, into this way of living, as this is the norm. And who knows where your spouse came from or who raised him and what kind of norm he has. And so these two norms are kind of clashing when this one says, no, this is normal. This is what we need to do. No, this is normal. This is what we need to do. So how do you deal with that?
Right. Exactly. That's a good question. So this is why when people are like, well, what, you don't work with people together as a couple, right? Like, because that's what most marriage people do, right? And I was like, no, because this is, first of all, I mean, as a whole, the statistics show it, most men don't have any interest in going to therapy. And if they do, they're like my husband, he was there begrudgingly only because I threatened to leave him if he didn't go. So that was really helpful, by the way, ladies. It doesn't help.
It doesn't work. No.
Like, he got a few good tidbits, but it didn't really make a big change. So this is the part where we can take control, right? Like, we only can control ourselves. And this is why it's like, I have some women be like, why do I always have to be the one that's changing? Like, what about him? Here's the thing. This is freedom, because you can't control him. Right. This is the problem, right? Like, but here's the truth of the matter is we all suck in some ways. Mm-hmm. If you don't know that,
speak for yourself.
I don't. Sorry.
I'm just kidding.
If that upset anybody, I mean, the truth of the matter is we do, right? So if you're really diving into yourself on how you're bringing the dysfunction, right? Like, for me, it was like, I thought, like, I'm doing all of these things. Like, I go to church, I do this, I do that. I've never lied, blah, 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 right? Like, I had this big list of how I'm the better spouse in my head, because I was trying so hard to make this marriage so great, right? And then when I really sat down and I evaluated, like, how even I stopped excusing my dysfunction. So I'll give you a real life example. Between us, his biggest complaint for me was how I spoke to him. This is an essential piece to all men, by the way. Like, I mean, most, if not all.
Mine too.
Yes. Is they, and if there a book, a very good resource for you moms out there, is Love and Respect. It is Christian based, so I don't know if you guys how you feel about that, but it is written by a psychologist, and he talks about how men as a whole would rather feel respected even over being loved. And so his biggest complaint about me was just how I talked to him. I was like, well, duh, like, and I justified that. I was like, of course I talk to you like this because you do this, right? And so if you would just stop doing that, like, then of course I would respect you, right? But if we flipped it and it was like, oh, well, I don't feel like you love me, right? And in some cases, that's how we feel, right? Like we're not feeling loved, right? Because they're not showing it to us in a way that we feel like it is. If we flip that and they were like, well, if you would just respect me, then I would love you, we would be like, that's ridiculous. Like, we're married. We're called to unconditionally love each other, right? But that goes back to your question, Katie, is who's right?
Right.
Well, we both have needs that need to be met within the relationship, right? But having the grace and understanding that they're going to mess up, and it doesn't mean that they don't love you. Having the grace and understanding for your spouse that seeing their perspective, not meaning and being tied to their direct love to you and for you, is freeing, right? Is like, they might just have a bad day. But going back to where I'm coming from as far as, well, see, I'm vamping now, so I'm getting a little off track. I'm sorry.
Where's the music? Cue the music.
Yeah, give me my music. I warned you. I have all these books up in my head. So anyways, but that's really what it comes down to, is when we're talking about what we have control over as individuals, is you can't control his ideas of what a good relationship or marriage should be. You can seek to understand them, and that will help you. That will help you empathize with him when he's having a hard time, right? But what you really can do is seek to understand maybe some dysfunctional traits you're coming into the marriage with, and owning those completely regardless of how he responds to your efforts to change that. That needs to be about you just being a good you. And that's the freedom in that, because we have control over that. So if my immediate habit is to lash out verbally at my husband, and I justify it, or I can say, yeah, that just shouldn't be okay, because it's not a good way to communicate, period. And as a person, I don't want to tolerate that within myself, right? That's a completely different mindset than like, oh, my husband wants me to change how I want to talk to him, so I guess I'll just go to counseling and work on it. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you were talking about, how we the ideas that we have about like what makes a good marriage, or makes us feel loved and that sort of thing, I thought of the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
And I've actually been having an interesting relationship with those in the past few months, because I've been going to therapy myself, and
awesome.
And in therapy, what we've been working on and talking about is the idea that, like, in my marriage, I don't do, or we shouldn't do things to prove that we love each other.
Right.
We should do things because we love each other.
Right.
So it's not like, I'll go get you ice cream to prove that I love you.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to go get you ice cream because I love you.
Yeah.
And then just like that distinction of doing things because I love you, it says to you, like, you're good enough already. I don't have to prove to you that I'm good enough for this relationship, and you don't have to do anything to prove that you're good enough for the relationship. We just are 2 people who are good enough for each other, and we're going to show it because that's what we believe in. That's how we want to have our marriage be. So anyway, I just felt like just as we're talking about that was just like a huge thing for me. I felt like people should know. So did you have something?
No, I was going to say that's great advice.
Yeah.
Both the Katies are talking at the same time.
You need nicknames, Katie, like K-Dub,
we do.
K-Hale.
Right? No, and when you were talking, Katie, I too had a couple of ideas pop up for me, and I was simply thinking, why do we as people tie our happiness to another individual and their actions? Like, okay, like let's face it, there are boundaries. So obviously if somebody's abusive to you, like that's a different thing. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But why do we tie our happiness to actions of individuals, words of individuals? Like, why do we do that?
Well, I mean, you think about what made up the dating relationship and what started your marriage, right? Like, you were already independently happy. the ideal situation. You really were. You knew how to do life without that person.
Right.
And so you had your friends and you had your hobbies and you had all these great things, and then they come in and it's just kind of sparked, right? Because they also same thing. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of it. It's just like, it's when you throw, I mean, just talk about love in general, right? Like you just feel like it's a high, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we get into marriage and it's literally, again, I'm going to use the analogy of doing a lifetime together, like we have in our heads that something has changed, right? Like, well, yeah, because now it's like, and what you start seeing is like the codependence, right? That's when you see a lot of people who are very unhappy in their marriages, kind of going into what you're talking about, that emotional boundary. I was very emotionally tight. I'm like, okay, so in my head, I'm like, I'm strong, I'm an independent woman, yeah, right? Like, I'm not emotionally connected to my husband, but every time he would be upset about something, I would meet him where he was at emotionally, because it was like, well, why are you acting like this, right? Like, so yeah, going into why we put ourselves on, like, expect that from them, I didn't know I was, right? I think that's the thing, Katie. Like, I don't think a lot of women realize they are expecting that, right? For me personally, from a spiritual point, right, I had been looking to him to fulfill a need that really for me only God could, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I think that that's the thing, is like, I didn't even know it. I didn't realize that, like, until I came face to face with it and was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like if he's unhappy, I'm unhappy. Like, that's so, and it was so hard for me to admit, because I'm like, I wouldn't do that. Like, but it happens so gradually that it's hard to recognize, I think, more than anything, right? And we want our relationships, that person we're tied to for the rest of our life, we want that fire and that flame, and we want to remember what it felt like when we were dating, you know, and we don't want to just sit on the couch and, you know, fall asleep to Netflix every night. No judgment, because sometimes we do that, but I'm just saying, you know, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I think it's a gradual and unintentional process that sometimes we're just totally unaware that we're even doing, right?
So it sounds like, and this is probably way easier for me to say than for anyone and everyone to do, but it sounds like in a perfect world, like ideally, you know, you're sitting across the table. Hey, you want to get married? Yeah, sure. Me too. Okay. You want to have kids? Cool. Yeah, me too. Here are my expectations of what a husband looks like.
Yeah.
Get it on the table. This is what but how do you know, growing up in your norms, like, how do you know that is an expectation that you should put out on the table? You know what I mean? Yes. Like, this stuff is hard.
Especially if you like grew up in a home where your parents didn't have a healthy marriage, like you don't even know that. You don't even know the things until you're like in that marriage and you're like, no, this is not something that I want to have anymore.
Yes.
You don't even know what's possible for your situation. So
yes. And going off that model too, is even the best of parents like, when we're talking about just like how our belief system is formulated from like a point of an attachment style, right? Like, even the best of parents or the best of relationships show you dysfunction, right? In some way. And we perceive dysfunction. So it's also our perception as children.
Right.
And we take those onward and outward. So to your point, Katie, to have those expectation talks, like you'll see a lot of premarital counseling do that, right? They ask you questions you wouldn't think of, you force you to have those conversations, right? So my husband and I even did that, right? And we talked about what expectations you have, but like you said, you don't really know until you're in it, right? Like I didn't know that my husband was going to wig out every time there was a dirty dish in the sink. Like, like, and he didn't list that in premarital counseling.
Right? Why didn't he?
Exactly. He didn't think he'd have to say anything or it would bug him, right? But that is where that is really important, because the deeper of understanding you have about yourself, the better you will be as a person in a marriage and outside of a marriage. And this is really important for even those who are divorced and remarrying, right? Because the truth of the matter is you're taking away one entity and then you're going to go into another marriage. Okay, but did you do the work on yourself as well? because that's wholeheartedly, whether you're in the marriage or not, like the truth and the real basis of all of this is you need to find out that dysfunction that you are bringing perpetually into all relationships, right? And for your own self, for your own peace, work on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
well,
really interesting. Go ahead, Beth. I was just going to say that's really interesting.
I was just going to say that, like, you know, there's this idea that if you're playing out a pattern in one area of your life, you're playing out that pattern in every area of your life. And it's interesting just because, like, for me, I realized that, like, in my marriage, I didn't have boundaries. Like, we never fought. It's because I just don't fight. Like, if someone wants something, okay, it's fine. Let's just do that, right? So not having that pattern in my marriage was also showing up in everywhere else in my life. And so I think that's like one of the really important things is people are doing this. And I don't know if you can tell us about how you've seen this show up in your work, but the problems that are showing up in your marriage aren't showing up there because, you know, it's just your marriage. It's your pattern everywhere in your life.
Yes.
So what can people do to bring awareness to themselves? It's like, I just didn't even realize I was playing out this pattern in a marriage. I was just like, we never fight. It's awesome. We just never fight. But not realizing that. So how can people like put that mirror on their marriage or on themselves and see what they are causing?
So this is a really good resource that I refer to everyone. That my very good friend who is a therapist recommended to me, is called How We Love. And it's a lot deeper than the love languages. So it's kind of like similar concepts and stuff with attachment styles, but it's very deep and it's very focused on you identifying that dysfunction that you're bringing to your marriage. So be ready to be challenged. You can Google it, How We Love quiz. And it's like a 10-minute process. It's nothing too crazy. And this is one of the assignments I will give my women, my wives, whatever you want to call them, the ladies that I work with, because this is a great step in the right direction of identifying some blind spots that you might have that are not serving you in all areas, right? And how you relate to people and how you communicate. Now, the real cool part about this too is that, and this was developed by two therapists who wrote the book, the real cool part about this whole process is that if you can get your spouse to take it, they have what's called core patterns. And you can take, like, for instance, I'm a vacillator, which means I go between pleaser and I'm actually a pleaser controller combination, which is weird. And my husband is an avoider pleaser. So those two kind of things. Basically, I pursue him. I need to have it all out on the table. Let's do this. Let's hash this out. And he's like, no, I need to run that away, right? So we have totally two different communication styles. And anyways, so the test brings to light, like you were talking about, how do you find those blind spots, right? Because for me, it was like, I feel like I do a lot of work on myself. All I can think about is like, I'm just a psychology geek and I love, like, you know, and analyzing people, and my friends will all tell you that. So, but something wasn't right? Like, my husband's not perceiving me the right way. We're breaking apart, right? And I noticed some strain in a lot of different relationships that I had, but I couldn't put my finger on it, right? So taking that test, becoming a little bit more aware of, like, oh, I didn't even know that. Because I was like, oh, I'm part controller. And my husband was like, yeah. And I was like, thanks, like, awesome, right? Like, but it's true, because I had no idea. I never looked at what I was doing as controlling, right? And the more I understood where that was coming from was like an area of my past where I felt the need to control my circumstances to feel safe. That brought it into how I operate on a regular basis and put strain on my relationships, right? But I didn't know that until that was brought to my attention, that was even a factor. So first step, very, very long answer to your question, is I would say take that take that quiz and identify maybe those traits that are within you and dive deep. That's the next step of my process, right? Is because that's when then they go, well, now what do I do about it? Right? So now that's where my coaching comes into play, where I work with them to then work step by step, day by day in the process of truly reformulating those trains of thoughts, right? That's not really how he feels in this instance, is it? No. Okay, so where is that coming from? Okay, so let's reframe that mind work that you have right now towards your husband, and how else can you go forward and approach him differently that might get you a different result, right? So getting a clear understanding of you and yourself, and this is key to all of it.
So that's interesting, and it just tells me that, you know, a lot of people maybe think, and maybe they don't, maybe I'm just totally don't know what I'm talking about, but when they get into marriages, they're like, oh, I'm good at this, like I can do this, like this should be no problem, and then maybe beat themselves up because things are not necessarily working out. But it sounds like there's all these things that people may not even know about themselves, like these things that still need to be discovered in order for two people to come together. So it's probably, and I know it's not common, but it's would probably be a good thing that everybody goes through some sort of premarital kind of counseling, or even newlywed type counseling. And it's not, doesn't mean that you're crazy or that, you know, there's anything wrong, but just that way you don't have all these, because then you start having like, you start holding grudges and things build year over year, and right. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. Why not get all that stuff out on the table right away? Like ideally in a perfect world. Right. And then you're not building upon all of these issues that you already had. I don't know. It's easier said than done, I guess.
No, I think that's good, right? I mean, premarital counseling, I honestly can't. It's so funny because there's still a stigma out there between getting a coach or getting therapy, right? A lot of people, and it's like once you actually go through therapy, you realize the strength it takes to actually go and seek and get help from a third party, right? Mm-hmm. So like, it's so funny because it's like, if you think about it, Katie, like how else do we come to the conclusion of our own blind spots if we don't have these kind of conversations, right? Yeah. They're our norm. So why would we even think that is what a blind spot is, right? Like it's just like, I'll use a weird analogy, but I always use this to just kind of depict how powerful our mindset is and how important it is to be so intentional about what we put in our brains, is because like if you know how they train elephants not to escape in the circus? Any chance? No. I'm gonna tell it anyways, but okay. So it's a condition. It's a mental conditioning process. They start when they're babies, and they chain them up to a stake in the ground. And when they're babies, they physically can't get away from that, right? So okay, Stephanie's like, she remembers. So when they can't get away from that, and when they're this huge, when they're babies, they'll try to, right? They'll actually struggle with it. They'll eventually learn, when I'm chained up, I can't escape, right? Mm-hmm. When they're this huge animal, they can be completely controlled by a flimsy rope and a stick in the ground, because all it is that representation of, it means stay put. And these unstoppable animals don't try anymore because they've learned that's their norm. No one's telling them that they're huge and they can just walk away at any time. I know this is, like I said, it's kind of a weird analogy, but our brains aren't any different. They work the same way. So if you don't have that outside guide and perspective, right, this is also playing into a point of how important your friends are. So if you have a friend that does not support your marriage, or just don't talk to them about your marriage.
Interesting. Okay.
But if you don't have that outside guide and perspective to say, hey, by the way, you know, like this is not something that like is good for you. Like this is not something that's serving you, right? That's just your norm. You don't even think to take that double take. So that to me is where, in my own journey of personal development, why I have valued therapy and coaching so tremendously, that I can't imagine my life without it at this point, right? Like it means I get to, oh cool, blind spot, awesome. That means I get to work on it, right? Like I have control over it.
Right.
And that's exciting to me now.
I feel the same way. So what happens when you're going through this discovery, you're uncovering the blind spots, you're figuring out each other's norm? What happens when one of the spouses, somehow you find out there's a true mental health issue? Like, we all have our stuff, but what about if there's a true diagnosable situation there? Have you dealt with any moms that, or any wives that have gone through that?
Yeah, I mean, and if I even pick it up with, that's why I it's so important that I do a consultation call before I start working with anybody, because I have talked to a few women who it's obvious that right now what they need is healing from past trauma. And that's not something that like I can work with them during or after, but I won't on good conscience work and say, I can help you through this, right? Without you curing the root, right? So if you have that past trauma, like I personally went through what's called an EMDR therapy process. And is it you too? She's shaking her head. Okay. So and that was absolutely, it's specifically to target trauma and a desensitization process to it, and that was absolute freedom for me. But then when it came to the coaching element, I was able to get that tactical, like step-by-step front moving forward advice that I really love, and that I really love to empower women to do, right? And move forward in a very positive way in my marriage with very specific ways I can change my habits, but also just in life in general, right? Because like that's really who I'm working with, is the women themselves. Like, what do you have in your life that you're no longer just doing because it makes you happy? There's so many times, like how many moms I've worked with and how many women I've worked with, and they're just like, gosh, there's always just something to be done. I just don't have time to fit in my yoga class, or
Right.
you know, like I feel guilty because, you know, and it's just like, no, like, because if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy, right? Like, I mean, you're not a good person for anybody, especially your marriage, right? If you yourself are not independently happy. So that's a big part of the process. But yes, if there is an actual mental health diagnosis, then they need to be working with a licensed therapist, psychiatrist, either in conjunction with my coaching or prior.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I've experienced. So I'm also in the coaching industry, and
nice.
Yeah, and so in the coaching industry, we see a whole lot of that. There are coaches out there that will say like, "I'll help you fix blah blah blah," and like I'm always like, "Oh dear heavens, no, you don't fix that." Like they need to go to a therapist to deal with that issue in their past, so that coaching can help them to move forward. And so that is a big thing. So what is it that you find is the number one issue or the number one thing that couples are having problems around that they have to deal with, and they come to you for that?
Oh, the number one. Yeah. I don't. There's
if you can't pick a number one,
there's definitely like not one, but it's
a handful.
Like it's all manifesting from time, money, sex, right? Like, and it's all really a foundation of just overall what's making you happy in your marriage, right? Like where your expectations are for where your marriage will be, right? So take sex, for example, because that's fun. That's a great topic. We have our own ideas of what sex should be like in a marriage too, right? Maybe your sex drives don't match up, and that's a complaint. That's an issue, right? Okay. How do you guys communicate about that? How do you guys sit down and work out a plan as a team because you guys are unsatisfied in that area, right? Because the truth of the matter is if we both need to work together to meet each other's needs, and one need is not being met, you need to sit down and you need to talk about it. Now, if you're not, that's what we need to talk about. Why not, right? Like, why is that not being properly addressed, assessed, and dealt with as something very serious between you two? How a man and a woman share their intimacy in their marriage is so important, right? And a common lie out there is like, it's not that big of a deal. It's a very big deal, right? But if that's just because you may be just fine and dandy with the way your sex life is in your marriage, but he may not, right? Or vice versa. Either way, it comes down to whether it's sex, it's money, it's raising kids. It all comes down to how you guys are able to sit down as a couple and communicate about it and team up on it, right? And then move forward in a positive, united front.
So I like that topic. So what kind of example, or maybe your best example of, obviously you're not going to share names or anything, but your best example of a client that you had that worked through that very situation. So, spouse A isn't getting it enough from spouse B, and therefore spouse A is not feeling loved and all of that. So how does this conversation happen? And what if spouse B is just not that into it? It's just not their thing. And spouse A is like really into it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
again,
yeah.
The norms there.
Yeah. Well, honestly, on a large majority, what I see is the men want more of it. The women can kind of take it or leave it. That's not always the case, right? But that's kind of the majority. And the fact of the matter is that is something that's very necessary. Not to say that it's not for women, but again, ladies, I'm generalizing here, okay, from psych data and studies. That is like a necessity for men, and for women on almost a whole, it's kind of like, But what I find is that the truth of the matter is like we're wired very differently. So we need to just be respectful of that, right? One's not right, one's not wrong. We're just wired differently, right? Like for me personally, I feel like I need to be mentally good. Like if I have stress up in this mess, like you can't turn me on. I think you can turn me on. My husband, I can bend over and it's like,
Point.
And I'm thankful for that. Right. But like, this is the point. It's just like mostly it comes down to women needing to sit down and really evaluate why they are not either desiring it or what they need on their end to maybe get turned on, right? Like, why don't you? And I don't think, like, sometimes, like you said, it's kind of like some people are just like, it's not a big deal. But when you really think of it as like a legitimate need for your partner, right? I would encourage all women to sit down and really think, like, if that's not really your drive, if that's not something that's meshing well, like, where is that really coming from, right? Are you not being satisfied during the process? Is it getting you to that process, right? Like, where's your mindset at? And then openly, kindly, not during, never during, kindly before or on another like a nice walk together, share this sensitively with your spouse, right? Like, because they're usually thrilled to know how they can turn you on, right? Like, just give me an instruction manual, right? But so if there's something in that process that's holding you back, take personal responsibility on it. Is it stress? What can you do to relieve your own stress, right? Mm-hmm. Is it because, like, you want him to do a certain thing or say or make you feel loved in some certain way? You feel like you're missing out. That's something that should be brought to his attention, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like, if well, I feel this way, and if you did maybe this would help me, and then it just deepens your level of understanding and intimacy, and that's really the foundation for sex, right?
Mm-hmm. So Beth, if you were to, and I don't have all the credentials that other Katie has. No, but if you were to ask me that question, just having observed a bunch of moms that are, a lot of them are married over a long period of time with MOMnation, I would say the top 3 things are sex, already talked about it, money, and in-laws.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like, talk to me about the in-law thing.
Those are
and
good.
How, so that's a difficult thing, right? Because these are totally different people who came from God knows where, who believe God knows what, and now you're raising their grandchild and you're with their baby, and talk to me about that.
Boundaries. oh snap.
Yeah.
That's really where it comes in, is setting really good boundaries with each other, right? And like when you talk about in-laws, the truth is, Katie, like, and I mean, we really just have to be, and Beth, sorry, I don't mean to leave you out of this. Sorry. I know you're here too. My perspective on that is literally, if you and your husband always come first, right? Like if you, and this is the ideal scenario, is that when you leave them to be one as a married couple, that is above all else the most important thing, right? There's a whole lot of layers of complications amongst that. I get that. But if above all else, you guys can remain united, that's the most important thing in handling in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
And being respectful of how you speak about the other's parents and their presence. That's like the two biggest things that I will say that are like your deal breakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you're seeing that cross of, well, my mom really says I should do this, or my dad should, feel I should do this, but my husband doesn't. It's like, okay, well, I'm sorry, you need to check with your husband on that, like, because you're married to him now. Mm-hmm. Like that's who you have joined and agreed to do life with. So basically, yes, drawing those boundaries, being very clear about it, and being in an agreement with each other on that, right? Like you come first, we're a team on this.
Right.
And then being sensitive, like when you feel like something is happening, for instance, like I'll use my own personal example. Like I love my in-laws. We all on great. When we had our kid, that was really challenging. It was like because it's unintentional, right? Like they think they know how to raise a kid better than you because they've done it before, right? Yep. And you see that a lot. And you as a mom is like, I'm the mom. Like that was how I felt anyways. Like this is my mama bear comes out, and I'm like, like don't tell me how to raise my kid, right?
Yeah.
So first was, okay, I noticed that when this happens, that this happens, right? And, talking to my husband, like, how do you feel like would be a good way for us to approach this in the future so this doesn't become a negative correspondence between us? Shit don't go down, right? Like, right. We want to keep things positive. So would you like to say something, or should we bring this up to them on a different level? Again, coming to the spouse first and handling it appropriately that way is the best case scenario, right? Yeah. But bringing it to them respectfully, for sure. Yeah.
So one of the interesting things in that in-law conversation is, I am a child of divorce, and so one of the things that I know as a child of divorce is that you're encouraged not to talk to your kid about how bad your ex-partner is or their parent is, because that's half of who they are. And so as a spouse, you're constantly coming to your husband and you're saying, hey, your mom sucks, your dad's a jerk, right? Like you're literally just communicating like everything that where you come from, these people that make up who you personally are, they're terrible humans, like that actually subconsciously communicates to your partner, I think you're a shit human, right? Like that's what you're saying to them on an unconscious level. And so how can you have these conversations where you can come and you can say, hey, it really hurts me how your mom says blah blah blah, without it being the person that created you.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good hard non-negotiable. Like if your spouse wants to say something negative about their parents, they can do it all day long, right? But no matter how you feel in that moment, that is not your permission to jump on that train and join in, because it's never going to be received well from your spouse. It's just not. It's just unnecessary negativity, right? Like, and vice versa, right? Like it's a boundary. Like you just don't. But coming and bringing legitimate things that bother you, right, about a situation or a scenario or a situation where you feel disrespected on to your spouse and saying like, hey, I wanted to get your take on this situation because this was how I perceived it and this was how I felt. We always want to start with the I feeling word, right? Like, and what is your take on the scenario? Because to tell you the truth, like I felt really violated in my boundaries. I felt like, you know, again, mother-in-law, I felt like she was really being critical on how I chose to handle taking, you know, my son to the doctor or whatever the scenario is. You're starting to come to your spouse in a respectful way, just simply stating, this is how it made me feel. What's your take on it? And what do you feel like would be the best resolution for this? And sometimes just having that conversation can kind of put your mind at ease too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, especially if your spouse can say, yeah, I noticed that too. And well, I'll talk to them about it, or, you know, actually I noticed that, and this is, and maybe bring another perspective to you too, because I've had my husband do that as well. And he's like, no, that's not like where that was happening. I noticed this about this scenario too, and you might need to rethink that. I mean, it's a different perspective.
Right.
So
right.
most importantly, coming to your spouse about respectfully from how you're feeling from that standpoint and asking them, like proposing it as a question too.
And
helps.
Then they, you know, hopefully know their parents better than you, or best, I should say.
Yeah.
So they should know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right.
Exactly.
So money.
Yeah.
Let's get it out there. Let's get it out on the table. Everybody's thinking about it. So how often, I mean, I know there's a whole variety of things and there's probably a whole variety of reasons, but how often do you get a couple, or not a couple, but a wife come through your door and it's a money problem?
Yeah, money is a tough one because, again, it's all coming down to you guys and how you agree upon doing things, right? And really with money, it's just, it has to work for you. Like it has to work for you guys. I've talked to several people who have separate funds. I've talked to several couples that do it all in one. I mean, there's so many different ways you can go about doing it, right? Like and it depends on how the income is split up, right? Is he the sole income provider? Is she the sole income provider? I mean, there's so many facets to money that I think that's why so many people will focus on that as such a huge issue, right? But then again, if you really do break it all down, it does all come back to you guys working together on a united front and team solution. So when I hear people struggling with money or finances, it just comes down to the fact that more often than not, they're not sitting down together and truly analyzing their ideals about how the money scenario should be handled and managed. And then if they are doing that and they just simply disagree, that's where that third party, whether it be a financial advisor, a pastor, a respected friend, can sit down and navigate that situation for you guys. More than anything, it's usually because there's a lack of communication of how the money should be handled in the first place. But yeah.
So I've done a lot of workshops on money mindset, and I've taught courses and that sort of thing on it. One of the interesting things with money is that money, it's a mirror. It reflects what's going on in all the areas of our lives. But when it comes to money mindset in particular, if we actually go and look at like the transactions or the things that you are fighting about, when it comes to money, that's actually gonna show what the fight's actually about. It's never somebody's objection to buying. It's never about the money. Somebody's problems or fights in their marriage. It's never, even if it's about money, it's never actually about the money. It's about the fact I feel so unsupported because you give me crap when I buy blah blah blah.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, and it's those core issues that are hidden behind the transactions that I think it's really, really interesting. And so when you think about those core issues that are hidden behind the money issues that people come to you with, what would you say that those actual issues are that they're fighting about, that they're saying they're fighting about money, but it's not actually money?
Well, that's the part of your own individual work, right? because and that's diving into, okay, well, how do you think your finances should be handled? What's your number one complaint you get from your spouse about how you handle money? So what does he complain about you? And what's your biggest complaint about him? And when you really sit back and you can identify where your complaint is coming from, because a lot of times, like you said, it's just we're viewing this as a money problem, but really it was like, well, he just spent like $2,000 on his truck and told me that we didn't have money to go out to dinner. That has nothing to do with money.
Yes.
You feel
Yes.
you don't feel valued. You don't feel loved, and you feel like you just got second seat to his truck there. Okay. So don't make the argument about money, because that's not what that is, right? But that is why those, first of all, going back to expectations and self-awareness, right, is when I have these conversations with these ladies and I say, what did that mean to you? And they have to actually sit there and go, it just really made me feel like I wasn't important. Okay, so that's the real issue. So then you can go back to your husband and you can say, okay, I feel, even though this was your money, this was our finance, whatever the case is, I don't care, take money completely off the table. When I asked you earlier if we could go out, and then you, on the contrary, spent this, it just really made me feel like I wasn't worth as much to you as your truck, right? That's a completely different conversation, right? So yeah, that's it. It all stems from, you first have to and can only really truly understand where your feelings are coming from. That's called like the litmus test, right? You sit back and you go, okay, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, where is this coming from? Like, check in with yourself and be honest with it, right? Like, we're not robots. We're not supposed to be just happy-go-lucky all the time. But it is really important for us, and what a lot of people don't practice is to sit back and check in. Like, okay, I'm feeling really anxious right now. Where is this coming from? Right. Like, and take note of it, right? And then be like, okay, I'm feeling that way because he just showed me that I'm not as important to him as his truck, right? And so that's just a really good example of, yeah, those core issues permeate every area, like, of your lives. And your marriage is just the good, bad, and the ugly, because they see all of it. And they're the mirror for you because you're there with them all the time, especially in quarantine.
Yes, all the time, literally. Well, this has been a lot of really good information and things to think about. So if people want to learn more from you, get involved or get connected to you, where can they do that, Katie?
So I have a free community called Marriage Empowered. So I would love for them to join my group there. That's specifically for wives. I actually built that community to start because I wanted to create a space for women who value their marriages and want successful ones, and also want to learn from each other. So we have a very strict, don't come there to just bitch about your husband rule. There's lots of spaces to do that on Facebook. Not that you can't come and be open. We want that. No, all topics are welcome, but it's with constructive, right? Like, let's help build each other up and give each other advice. So I've been through that because we can all learn from each other. Right. So that's Marriage Empowered. That's my community for you ladies. And then you can book if you're part of the MOMnation network, and you mentioned that you saw me on this interview, you get a 1 hour free consultation call with me. And you can book that on my Katie Mae Marriage Empowerment Coach business page.
Thank you. That's amazing. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. So that's how you find me.
Well, we appreciate having you. And Beth, what do we want our audience to do?
Well, we want you guys to go to your platform that you listen to your podcast on. We want you to rate, review, subscribe, and download these episodes. If you do not download them, they don't count, which is really stupid, but hey, it is what it is. But if you are going to rate us, please only leave 5 stars. If you don't love us enough yet to leave 5 stars, wait until you do. listen to a couple more episodes because you will. And leave a review. And like the most fun, saucy, entertaining reviews are the ones that get people to really, really listen. We have a really big mission with MOMnation to be able to help moms who they need a hand up to be able to transition out of a relationship or past, if they had a partner who passed away or something like that. If you do end up needing to move to that single mom stage of life, we're working on building MOMunes.
Cool.
We're building MOMnation to be able to build homes for moms who really, really need a place as they transition.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so if you want to be able to help us as we work towards that, just message myself, message Katie. We'll let you know how to get more involved with MOMnation. So we have lots and lots of ways to do that. So, but the most important thing right now is just going, rate, review, subscribing, and downloading these episodes on the platform of your choice, not your cheese. I really like
or your cheese.
Or your cheese. But iTunes is the best place to do that. So.
Hey, Beth, real quick, 1 second to our listeners. I do want to just put a quick caveat to everything we talked about today. For you women out there who are feeling at all unsafe in your marriages, that is not what we're talking about. So if you are in an unsafe situation, if you are at all being, physically, verbally, emotionally abused, right, and you need to get somewhere safe, please do that. And then seek professional counseling in that process. So just thought I would throw that caveat out there. Sorry.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. All right, ladies.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks so much for having me on.
It was awesome, Katie. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.